Well, Jim, whether it's Crown Jewel or comparing Moxley and Jericho to Sting and Flair, Tony Khan has been trending. Every now and then you see it on Twitter. You see Tony Khan trending, and apparently, news to me until I heard about it from someone earlier today, there was another wrestling personality of the past who was trending on Twitter in the past few days.
Not me either.
For once. For once.
Apparently, and he trended under his given name rather than the name that everybody knows him as, Shitstain. But our friend Vince Russo trended on Twitter the other day from making, again, another ignorant remark. But this time it was a funny, ignorant remark. And people got on there and started they put the boots to him better than I could. It was almost universally negative. But what he was doing apparently on one of his recent programs, somewhere, an interview somehow, he was critiquing the wrestling matches. He actually said he was watching one of the girls' matches in the WWE, and of course, they're using the forearms instead of the punches. And he said, so what's the deal now? Nobody throws punches? When did they start punching with their forearms? Like 10 years ago, you fucking idiot. What do you think we've been talking about for years and years and years? Nobody can throw a punch anymore. They're all doing these little flipper forearms. Somehow they got it from Japan or something. However, the thing that was so hard for people to stomach, and especially for me, knowing the background of this individual, is the fact that here's this fucking Nimrod critiquing any matches at all. And I know some people are going to say, oh, well, Jim, you don't like him and you hate the guy and he used to write this and do that. Let me let y'all in on another little something about Mr. Russo. Even when he was writing this shit, he refused to have any responsibility whatsoever in producing not only any of the matches from bell to bell, but also even any live interviews or angles that started out talking that broke out into physicality. He would refuse. He would demand that another producer produce those. He said, well, no, the wrestling's not my thing, bro. So you guys are the professionals. So what this was, he was writing the television program, writing the format. He was coming up with the matches, who was supposed to wrestle who. And he would even tell the producers and or agents how the match somehow was supposed to end with somebody being hit in the head with a sledgehammer or whatever. And then it would be up to you to figure out the rest of it. It's kind of like if somebody decided to write a murder mystery and got the first 2 chapters done and then handed it off to you and said, well, you do the rest of it and figure out who committed the crime. It's not my fucking mystery, motherfucker. The mystery is how you ever got in this position. So in TNA, especially, not only, again, would he not have anything to do with the production of the actual matches, anything involving physicality, because he knew he didn't know what he was talking about. But then on live interviews, the producer for whatever segment had to be in the production truck to tell the director what was supposed to be coming up. Make sure they didn't miss a camera shot if somebody was going to be running in out of nowhere or whatever the fuck. But old Shitstain would insist that the person who helped come up with, lay out, or mutually agree on with the talent any physicality in that interview segment had to be in the truck also. Because he didn't want to be responsible for producing any of the physicality just because he's writing a wrestling program. So you know what I did, Brian? Since I was the lead wrestling producer, I'd be in the truck for 3 or 4 segments in a row. And then a live interview segment would come up and I'd tell him, oh, stop down. What's the matter? Need to go find Vinny Roo. This is his segment. Because that's what he'd do. He'd spend all fucking day wasting his time on the goddamn pre-tapes with the underneath guys that would go on forever and multiple takes because that was his dramatic Shakespearean fucking verbiage coming to life. And he especially liked to work with the mid-card guys because the top guys wouldn't say all the shit he wanted them to say, and he didn't feel like they came out as good. So he'd spend all day on the pre-tapes, and then he'd sit down with the guys with the live interviews, and he'd tell them all the shit they were supposed to say. But when it came time to get in a fight, he'd have to go get the other producer, so I started stopping him down, saying a live interview's coming up. Where's old Vinny Roo? This is his baby. He needs to be in here. And you know where he'd be? He'd be sitting out in the crowd with the rest of the marks watching the fucking matches. And they'd have to send somebody in to get him and say, hey, this is your segment. And he'd have to come back to the truck and sit there like a fucking mute because there was nothing to say because it's an interview and they're just shooting it. But since he had to have a goddamn experienced professional in the truck every time that we went over his head with shit that was too complicated for him, I figured the least he could do is get up off his ass from sitting out in the crowd and come back in the truck when it was his fucking brilliance that was on display. But yeah, so now this guy's critiquing wrestling matches when he didn't want to have anything to do with them when he wrote the fucking show. So fuck you. How about that?
All right, I guess how about that? That is that.
Yeah, that's that.
He's now critiquing matches. We'll see what happens in the future with these amazing expert
Can
critiques.
you imagine the first and only human being in the history of the wrestling business that was allowed to write a show and still had no idea how to fucking help two guys put a match together and refused to try to learn?
I'm not too surprised, but let me ask you some more questions here, Jim.
And by the way, that was 2009. That was after he'd been in the business for 12 fucking years. Go ahead. Keep going.